Pundits on the progressive left routinely charge America with being a racist country, or guilty of what they call systemic racism. An entire industry has been built on this premise, with advocates like Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo getting rich in the fight against this alleged enemy. Recently, at the commencement ceremonies for a black college, the President of the United States said that racism was an enemy that would never go away, and it was the supreme threat to the security of our nation. This is all nonsense. The charge that America is a racist nation is easily disproven. I agree with Gerard of the Wall Street Journal, who argued that America is the least racist nation in the history of the world. Racism is a terrible sin, a violation of biblical theology, and America has been egregiously guilty of it in the past. It still exists, but it's a tiny fraction of what it once was. Do you want to be judged on the basis of your worst moment as a person? On a mistake you made in the distant past? Or should you be judged on current weaknesses? America has 30 million alcoholics. Does that define America? Is America a nation of drunks? 43,000 Americans were killed in auto fatalities last year. Does that define America? And what about homicides? And the left would not argue that Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, or many others are defined by their murder rate. Yet it's a terrible scourge on those cities. But does it define them? Racism of the past and current incidences of racism do not define America. As with so many progressive leftist lies, the opposite is the truth. America is the best country in world history for black people to live in. We have the richest black community on earth, and the richest in the history of the world. If for statistical purposes you considered our black community a nation, it would be as rich as countries like France and England, richer than countries like South Korea, Saudi Arabia, or Italy. It would be twice as rich as any country in Latin America, and richer than all of them. It would be dramatically richer than any country in Africa, often 50 times richer. I realize there is more to life than money, but ask someone in the black community if they would like to become like many African citizens and lose 98% of their wealth. Black unemployment is less than 5%, the best it has been in history. The Wall Street Journal reported that in the last decade, tens of millions of black Africans applied for visas to immigrate to the United States. I guess someone neglected to tell them how racist we are. Black Americans are politically the freest in the history of the world. In the 1857 Dred Scott decision upholding slavery, the Supreme Court said that the black man has no rights the white man is obligated to respect. Currently, 2 of the 9 members of the Supreme Court are African Americans. 50 members of Congress are African Americans. Some of the most famous people in history are black Americans. One could argue that for many years Barack Obama has been the best known person in the world. Appearing on the left-wing program The View, Tim Scott, an African American running for president, said, quote, "One of the reasons I'm on this show is your comment that the only way for a young African American kid to be successful in this country is to be the exception and not the rule. That is a dangerous, offensive, disgusting message to send to our young people today, that the only way to succeed is by being the exception. The fact of the matter is, we've had an African American president, African American vice president. We've had 2 African Americans to be secretaries of the state. In my home city, the police chief is an African American who's now running for mayor. The head of the highway patrol for South Carolina is an African American." End quote. So, why do progressives insist on perpetuating this lie? First, it gives them political power. If you tell the black community it is under the thumb of the white man, it is easier to control them politically. Another reason is that fighting racism is a good way to make money. A writer in National Review observed, quote, "Many major universities have created graduate programs in diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI programs. Degrees are being given to people who plan to make a career out of DEI initiatives. But if one's livelihood consists of fighting racism, wouldn't the end of racism spell trouble?" And that sounds like a large number of people with jobs that literally depend on racism, the very thing the jobs are meant to eliminate. End quote. But we have now come to the biggest reason. Progressives insist America is racist because fighting racism gives religious meaning to their lives. Without this struggle for justice, life would lose its purpose for many on the left. So the fiction of racism must be kept alive. Tim Scott said the reason he is hated by the left is because, quote, "I disrupt their narrative. I threaten their control. The truth of my life disproves their lies." End quote. Once again, I hate to be the bearer of good news, but racism is on the wane in America. If you are a person of color, this is the best nation to live in the history of the world, and this is the best moment to be living in it. Thanks for listening. Our God is the God who saves men and women, regardless of the color of their skin. May He bless you this day in a mighty way.